Hi, I'm Leah. I'm 34 years old, and if at first it seems like that sentence is just a page layout for my life, let me tell you right now, behind it lies 6 months, during which my idea of myself, people, and home has been shattered and rebuilt from the rubble of trust and new decisions. Because 6 months ago, my life completely fell apart when I found out that my husband Mark had cheated on me not once or twice, but many times over the course of 6 years of marriage, and the final blow was when his latest mistress got pregnant by him. Can you believe it? The man who broke our marriage with his constant betrayal had the audacity to go to court and demand a large share of our property, claiming that he needed it for child support. But the judge fortunately quickly saw through his tricks, and as a result I was left with our apartment in a good area and with the sum of $250,000 according to the agreement, after which, as if on cue, I crossed Mark out of my life, tried to start over and discovered that starting over is sometimes more difficult than destroying. For the first months I hardly communicated with my parents, Luigi and Elena, who were always immersed in their own affairs, and with my younger sister Raimonda, who was 27 and who, as it seemed to me, was absorbed in her own relationship with Carlos, a young man in marketing, but, due to this immersion of their lives in something of their own, each of my appeals remained somewhere in the queue, and from this loneliness seemed bottomless, although, as children, Raimonda and I were very close. I was working remotely, hiding in the routine of coding and bug fixes, and the apartment after the divorce, although nice, 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen, convenient location, seemed empty without Mark and our shared memories, like a photo you hung on the wall but forgot to label. One evening, somewhere around 4 months after the divorce, my mother called, and there was such a warm insistence in her voice that I could not refuse right away. "Leah, honey, we are having dinner with the whole family this Saturday. Raimonda and Carlos will be there too. We really want to see you." And although I hesitated, I answered with the usual excuse, "I don't know, Mom. I have a lot of work," but she gently insisted, "Please, Leah, we miss you. It's just dinner." And in this request, in the subtle pause after the words, there was such a simple human need that I agreed. On Saturday, as I drove up to my parents' house, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and hope, and when I walked in, I saw Raymond and Carlos on the couch, holding hands and smiling, and for the first few minutes at dinner, everything seemed to go on as usual. Dad was cutting the roast, Mom was fussing with side dishes, Raymond was talking about her work at the gallery, Carlos about the marketing campaign, and I was listening, trying not to detect cracks. But when Mom suddenly put down her fork and looked straight at me, asking a question that sounded like the beginning of a new chapter, "Leah, what are you going to do with your apartment?" My throat went dry. I swallowed the bite and answered, as I thought then, "I'm thinking of buying a house. I have enough for a good down payment. The rest is a mortgage, and I would rent out the apartment so that I could pay off the mortgage with the rent." And at that moment, something slipped between my parents and Raimonda that I couldn't immediately read, where Dad cleared his throat slightly, and Mom, taking my hand, said with the same friendly but delicate insistence with which she had called earlier, "Actually, Leah, we have a better idea, a fairer one." I raised an eyebrow and asked what they meant, to which Mom answered practically and quickly, "Raimonda's lease is up next month, and she wants to move in with Carlos. It would be ideal if they could live in your apartment for free." And then she added, as if covering a difficult request with a kind mask of concern, "It would help them save money, and you wouldn't have to look for tenants and deal with household chores." Everything inside seemed to stop. I had been counting on the rental income to somehow balance the mortgage payments on the future house, but Raimonda's face expressed such a plea, as if her voice contained both fatigue and hope, and a little fear of the financial uncertainty, and she leaned forward, her eyes shining. "Leah, please. We really need this. Carlos and I are thinking about the future, and the expenses right now are just huge." And Mom, squeezing my hand, promised that it was temporary. I looked at them, at my parents, who were used to sharing difficult decisions with each other, at my sister, in whom I still remembered a child with pigtails and eternal paints on her fingers, and deep down, I understood that if I refused, they would perceive it as a new wall, and not as a legitimate desire to maintain financial independence. Therefore, with a heavy heart, but wanting to maintain that subtle connection with the family, I said slowly, "Well, at least let them pay the utilities." And Raimonda, as if lifting a burden from her shoulders, almost jumped with joy. "Of course! We will take on all the utilities." Thank you, Leah. You are the best sister. And I smiled tensely, feeling that I was making a mistake, but no longer able to retreat. 2 weeks later, I had completed the purchase of a house in a quiet neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, a large kitchen, a yard, that one-room home office option, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel like I was starting my life over. Working from my own home was not at all what I had imagined within the cold walls of that old apartment where every shelf reminded me of Mark. A week after moving in, Raimonda and Carlos moved into my old apartment, bringing a modest bouquet and lots of thanks, and Raimonda hugged me tightly and promised that they would take good care of the house and pay all the utilities. "You won't have to worry about anything," she said, and I handed them the spare keys, trying to believe my own words that this was really the right thing to do. Life in the new house had created a new rhythm for me, rising at 7 in the morning, a cup of coffee by the wide kitchen, checking my email, then going upstairs to my home office, where, behind a monitor and lines of code, I slowly rebuilt not only functional modules but also my ability to trust the morning light. And in the evenings, when the house was filled with the silence and coolness of the garden, I would sometimes sit in the kitchen and, looking out the window at the narrow street and the rare passers-by, think about how perhaps all this was only the beginning, and that, despite the fact that I was again part of the family Sunday dinners and received from Raimonda photographs of new curtains and flowers on the windowsill of the old apartment, deep down I still had that same quiet, reasonable worry. After all, I had given the potential flow of rent into the hands of the family, and a mortgage is a stubborn thing and does not know family stories. And one such evening, when the twilight was falling on the garden, and I, resting my palm on the cold glass windowsill, was thinking about how softly and at the same time sharply the need to relearn how to ask for help and give it had entered my life. A notification from Raimonda sounded on the tablet. A photo of the living room in my old apartment, where new curtains softly caught the evening light, and in the signature there was a simple, "Thank you, Lee." I smiled, but this smile was complex. There was room in it for gratitude and for doubt, and for a quiet decision not to spill again that fragile independence that I had so carefully built up. And on this note, on this contradiction between the warmth of family hands and the demands of reality, my current chapter closed not with a conclusion or an ending, but rather with a period before the next breath, because ahead, as I now knew with certainty, life was not going to become simple, but something was starting to bother me. At these dinners, Raimonda would increasingly talk dreamily about wedding venues, expensive ceremonies she'd seen on social media, and how much they cost, and I'd nod politely but know where this was going. She'd mention engagement parties, honeymoons, always emphasizing the expense and hardships of young couples without family support. And one night, over dinner, my mother remarked, "You're lucky to have money after your divorce. Not everyone gets such a fresh start," to which I'd replied, with a slight drawl, "Mom, I earned that money in 6 years of marriage, remember?" "Of course, honey. I meant you're in a good position to help others now," and I'd smiled tightly. "I already am." Raimonda and Carlos are living in my apartment for free, realizing that hints of further help kept coming, but I steered the conversation to work or home renovations, just to avoid the obvious direction of the conversation. A few weeks later, Raimonda called me on a Tuesday evening, and I was sitting in the garden with a book, feeling the light breeze on my hands and the smell of flowers from the flower beds, and her voice was so joyful that I almost pushed the phone away. "Leah, guess," Carlos proposed. "We are engaged." "Congratulations!" "This is wonderful news," I said, trying to keep a calm tone. "I'm so happy I even cried for an hour," she added, and I couldn't help but laugh. "I'm really happy for you." "Oh, Leah, I can't wait to start planning everything," she said, her voice literally overflowing with delight, and I felt a slight tightening in my stomach, realizing that this serious conversation was close and would lead to what I was trying so hard to avoid. After the call, I sat in the garden for a long time, digesting the news, realizing that something was coming that could change our relationship. Saturday came too quickly. I drove up to my parents' house at exactly 2 o'clock, took a deep breath of the jasmine growing near the gate, and walked to the door. Inside, it was lively, voices, laughter, a light aroma of a freshly cooked dinner. Raimonda, Carlos, and my parents were gathered in the living room, and on the table lay wedding magazines, printouts, brochures from contractors. "Leah!" Raimonda jumped up and hugged me. "It's great that you came. We were just discussing everything." I sat down on the couch and listened as she beamed at me as she described her dream wedding. I want a champagne fountain, a 3-tiered cake with fresh flowers, and to release white doves during the ceremony. Isn't that romantic? I rolled my eyes to myself, but kept my face calm. And we need a great DJ, Carlos added. My cousin had one that kept everyone on the dance floor. Also a photographer, videographer, florist. Raimonda continued, I want everything to be perfect. My parents nodded excitedly, offering ideas, and I sat there, watching, understanding where this was all heading. Finally, after an hour of discussion, Raimonda clapped her hands. Okay, let's go to the table. I want to show Leah our plans. We moved into the dining room, where she pulled out a folder and laid out the sheets of paper in front of me as if presenting a business project. I've been working on this all week, look. On the sheet of paper was a neat list. Venue rental, $15,000, catering for 150 guests, $25,000, photography and videography, $8,000, flowers and decor, $12,000, wedding dress, $5,000. The list went on, and at the bottom, in bold letters, was the amount of $115,000. I couldn't help but exclaim loudly, $115,000? Staring at her in shock. Raimonda, where are you and Carlos going to get that kind of money? She shrugged with a naive smile. That's exactly what I wanted to discuss. We thought you could pay for the wedding. I laughed briefly, incredulously. Raimonda, I spent $20,000 on my entire wedding and thought it was crazy expensive, and you want me to shell out over $100,000 for yours? Raimonda's face changed, and she looked offended. That's not fair. Your wedding was a long time ago. Mom intervened. Leah, times have changed. Nowadays, it's customary to have lavish weddings. It's always been customary to have weddings within your means, I retorted, looking straight at my sister. Listen, I love you, and I want to help. I'll give you $15,000. You have to find the rest yourself or cut back on these ridiculous expenses. Raimonda's jaw dropped, and her eyes filled with tears. $15,000? That's it? Leah, how can you be so selfish? You have money, and you're going to ruin my wedding. I'm not ruining anything. I'm being realistic. She snatched the papers from my hands and stood up abruptly. Okay, if you don't care about my happiness, forget it. And ran upstairs to her old room, bursting into tears. Carlos stood awkwardly and followed her. The dining room fell silent. My parents stared at their plates, avoiding my gaze, and after a few more minutes, I stood up, picked up my bag, and left. 2 months had passed since that disastrous family gathering, and the silence from my family had become deafening. No invitations to Sunday dinners, no random calls, nothing. I texted my mom once. Are we having dinner on Sunday? She replied 2 hours later. No. Then I stopped trying. If they wanted to act like children, that was their choice. I had my own life, and honestly, the peace and quiet wasn't that bad. No more awkward family dinners where I had to listen to Raymond's wedding fantasies, no more hints that I should spend my money on their whims. I threw myself into working and decorating the house, painting the spare room, planting a garden in the backyard, and even starting a relationship with a guy I met at a programming meetup named Marcus. Then, out of the blue, an invitation arrived that changed everything, from my cousin Sarah, my father's sister's daughter. She was turning 30, and she was hosting a big barbecue at her house. The invitation was addressed only to me, which meant my parents probably didn't know. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to avoid seeing my family, but I missed them and had always gotten along well with Sarah, and I wondered if my parents and Raymond would be there. I drove up to Sarah's house Saturday afternoon, feeling a strange combination of excitement and a little apprehension as I pulled up to her house, not knowing what to expect after everything that had happened in the last few months. Her backyard was full of people, relatives I hadn't seen in months, kids running around with water balloons, tables laden with food, the aroma of grills and fresh-baked goods mingling with the scent of flowering bushes to create an atmosphere that was at once familiar and foreign, and the first person I noticed was Uncle Tom at the grill, waving at me, and I smiled back as I made my way through the crowd, saying hello to aunts and uncles and cousins, relieved by the genuine joy with which they greeted me, as if I was part of something again. But then I noticed them. My parents were sitting at a table by the fence, beer in their hands, talking to my aunt. They saw me at the same moment. Dad nodded, Mom immediately turned away, as if trying to avoid my gaze, and Raimonda and Carlos were sitting at the dessert table. She was showing the ring to her cousins, and when she noticed me, her smile wavered. But she did not look away. I took a beer from the fridge and tried to relax, although the internal tension was growing with each passing second. An hour later, Sarah found me. "I'm so glad you came," she said, and hugged me tightly. "It's been too long." "Thank you for the invitation." "Great party," I replied, feeling the warmth of her sincerity. "Listen, I don't know what's going on with your family, but this silent punishment is stupid. Know that you are always welcome at my parties." I squeezed her hand. "I appreciate it more than you know," and felt the tension ease a little. As the evening wore on, I was chatting with some cousins my age, discussing relationships, future plans, and dreams. "I hope David proposes soon," Michelle said. "We're serious about this." "Great," Sarah replied. "What kind of wedding do you want?" "Something small and simple, maybe a ceremony on the beach with just our loved ones." "I'm the opposite," Jenny laughed. "I want a big church wedding, a huge reception, the whole shebang." And then, like a cloud falling, one of the aunts, clearly drunk, Aunt Carol, intervened, loudly declaring, "You know what I think? Of all the girls, Leah is the only one who's truly unique." The group froze, and I was about to say something when Raymonda suddenly appeared next to me, her face flushed, her voice sharp. "You want to know what I think? I think Leah is the biggest loser." Her husband didn't just leave her, he cheated on her many times and left her for another woman who bore him a child. The whole yard fell silent, all eyes turned to me. I felt a heat in my chest, but I smiled calmly and looked straight at my sister. "Do you want to know what it's like?" My voice rang out throughout the yard, surprising even myself. "It's actually quite nice, especially considering that the very same main loser you're talking about is going to evict you from his apartment right now." Raymonda's smile slowly slid off her face, and bewilderment appeared in her eyes. "What?" she whispered, and I, still smiling, calmly explained, "You got it. By the way, congratulations on your engagement. I hope you've already found yourselves a new place." I walked up to Sarah, hugged her, thanked her for the party, and headed to the car, ignoring the stunned silence behind me. At the first traffic light, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Raymonda, 2 from Mom, 1 from Dad, and a stream of messages that were filled with panic and desperation from "What did you mean?" to "You can't seriously be evicting us?" I smiled and put the phone away, feeling strangely calm. At home, over a cup of tea, I checked my phone again. 17 missed calls and increasingly desperate messages. I turned off the phone and went to bed, knowing that tomorrow I would deal with the consequences. On Sunday morning, I was sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee when I heard cars pulling into my yard, and looking out the window I saw the whole family: Mom, Dad, Raymond, and Carlos. They looked like they were about to stage an intervention on me. I opened the door before they could knock and let them into the living room. Everyone was tense, Raymonda's eyes were red and puffy from recent tears, and Mom began timidly, "Leah, you can't seriously think about evicting Raymonda and Carlos. They have nowhere else to go." "That's not my problem," I replied, sitting down in my favorite chair. "You should have thought about it before Raymonda decided to humiliate me in front of the whole family." Finally, Raymonda spoke up, her voice shaking. "Leah, I'm really sorry. I was drunk and angry, and I said terrible things, but please don't punish Carlos. He's not guilty of anything." "You're right, it's not his fault. But he's dating you, so we'll have to share the consequences," I said, keeping my eyes on her. Carlos fidgeted nervously and added, "Leah, we really have nowhere to go. My lease ended when we moved in with you. We were only saving for the wedding, not for a new place." "Well, start looking soon. You have 2 weeks," I said calmly, feeling a strange mixture of strength and relief, because now everything depended on them, and not on me. 2 weeks? Raymonda's voice broke, trembling and full of horror, as if it reflected all the panic that had been building up for a long time since that humiliating evening at Sarah's barbecue. "It's impossible to find an apartment and save up for a deposit in that time." I shrugged, trying to hide my inner excitement, and said calmly, almost icy, "You should have thought of this yesterday." Mom leaned forward, her eyes filled with anxiety and despair. "Leah, you're taking revenge. This is not like you." "On the contrary, it's very much like me," I answered, feeling the words roll off my lips like carefully calibrated shells. "I'm tired of being everyone's doormat. Raymonda lives in my apartment for free and then publicly insults me, and you all stood and watched. Some even laughed." Dad looked down, sensing my frankness. "We weren't laughing at you, Leah. We were just dumbfounded." "Nonsense," I snapped, not hiding my irritation. You were enjoying the spectacle. Raymonda burst into tears again, her shoulders shaking, her voice trembling, but her attempt at pleading and self-pity was clear. I'll apologize publicly. I'll call everyone who was there and tell them I was wrong. I'll write a post on Facebook. Anything. Just please don't evict us. I raised an eyebrow, internally assessing her desperation, and said calmly, "It's too late. You made your choice yesterday." The argument went on for another hour. My parents tried to talk, tried to appeal to feelings. Raymonda begged, Carlos interjected, but I remained adamant, like a stone wall that couldn't be penetrated. Eventually they left, Raymonda still crying, and the others looking broken, as if their own guilt was weighing on their shoulders. The next 2 weeks were filled with calls and visits. I saw Raymonda's attempts to beg, apologize, promise, persuade. Her parents tried to mediate, to take their daughter's side, but my words were precise and decisive. Even Carlos, who came once to plead for them, could not change my decision. I watched this calmly, feeling how inner peace gradually returned, as if each attempt at pressure only strengthened my boundaries. Exactly 2 weeks later, I parked in front of my old apartment and saw Raymonda and Carlos loading things into a van. My parents helped them, their faces tense, their eyes a mixture of anger and resentment, and I watched quietly, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. I did not participate in this panic. I only left the consequences of their choice. A week later, new tenants moved into the apartment, a young married couple who regularly paid full rent and took care of the place as I planned. The rental income almost completely covered the mortgage, and this brought a sense of control and stability. 6 months passed quietly. I was completely immersed in my work, enjoying the results of my labor every day, spending time with Marcus. His presence was surprisingly easy, without drama and demands. He supported me, and together we found harmony in ordinary things, cooking dinner together, walking in the garden, talking until late at night. I made new friends through the hiking club, took part in joint hikes, trips and evenings, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that my life was my own, that every element of it was my choice, and not the result of someone else's demands. And then, one ordinary day, an email from Raymonda appeared in my email with the subject line, "I'm sorry." I almost deleted it. The desire to avoid contact with my sister was strong, but curiosity outweighed it, and I opened the letter. It began with a sincere confession. "Leah, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I had to write. I'm getting married in 2 weeks, and I can't get married without trying to apologize one more time. What I said at Sarah's party was unforgivable. I was jealous of your success and independence. I wanted to hurt you because you refused to pay for my dream wedding. I've envied you my whole life. You were always smart, successful, the one people were proud of. I thought that making you look bad would make me feel better, but it didn't. I just lost my sister. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. It's a small wedding, in Mom and Dad's backyard, with only 30 guests. It's not what I dreamed of, but it's within our means, and in fact, it's closer to home. I wish you could come, but I understand if you don't want to. Love, Raymonda." I read the letter 3 times, feeling its words fill me with a strange warmth. The first time in a long time that someone in my family was telling the truth without trying to get their way, without manipulation. I thought all day, pondering the answer, and finally wrote, "Raymonda, thank you for your apology. It means a lot to me. I'm not ready to restore our relationship yet, but I appreciate your honesty. I hope your wedding will be exactly the way you want it to be. I won't be there, but I'll send a gift. Leah." I transferred $5,000 to her account with the note, "Wedding gift, M. The answer came instantly. "Thank you so much. It means everything to me." 2 weeks later, she sent photos. The wedding was sweet, simple, elegant, garlands of lights in her parents' garden. Everyone was genuinely happy. Raymonda was shining in a simple dress that clearly cost 10 times less than the pompous idea she had cherished before. And I continued to live my life. Work was going well. The mortgage was covered by the rental income. Marcus and I were talking about moving into a shared place, and I had friends around me who supported me rather than demanded. I recently sent my mom a birthday card with a quick, happy birthday, and she sent me a photo of a flower in response. A small step, but still a step forward. I realized that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who are most willing to take advantage of you, and that setting boundaries isn't cruel but necessary for my own happiness and peace of mind, which I now value above all else.